Alright, let's just go through each one of these. Let's just do number 1. Alright? Hopefully I get them right, because I don't have the answers to them, so we'll see. Maybe if there's a consensus, we'll know if we got it right or not. So it's 1 over p plus 2 over 3p, and then equals negative 1. Alright. Let's go yellow. Alright, so what we have to do is we want to get rid of the denominators, and so we do that by finding a common denominator and then multiplying everything by that common denominator. So that should be pretty easy. I've got a 3, I've got a p here and a p here, right? So I've got just 1. Just 1 shows up, so my common denominator is just 3p. So we multiply everything by 3p. Multiply that by 3p. Everything, right? Not just the one thing, not just the left side, but both sides, everything on both sides. Alright, let's see what happens here. The p cancels out with the p right here. This whole 3p cancels out, and we'll multiply that together. Alright, so let's drop all that down. What do we have here? Just 3 times 1, right? Which is just 3. Plus, what happens here? The 3p's canceled out, so I just have a 2. And right here, we have negative 3p. Did I do that right? Yep. That's a 5. Equals negative 3p. Divide by negative 3. And there it is. Negative 5/3. Pretty simple, huh? Okay. This must be the right answer sheet right here then, because the first answer does say negative 5/3. But you said the other ones didn't look like what I read off. So let's try another one. Let's try number 2. It's x minus 33 over 10 equals negative 2x minus 3 over x. I'm looking at this problem. This is a little bit different. I could do this another way. Instead of multiplying both things by the common denominator. I mean, that'll work. But you could cross multiply, couldn't you? You see that? When you have a fraction set equal to another fraction, you can just cross multiply and solve for x. Anybody think about doing that or no? What would you rather do? Would you rather multiply by 10x? Because that's what we've been doing. You want to cross multiply? Alright, let's cross multiply. So what I have to do is I got to make sure I put that in parentheses because I have to distribute that. Multiply this. You see it? Doesn't really cross, but there you go. Alright, so what do we have? We have x times x minus 33 equals 10 times negative 2x minus 3. Alright, and let's solve for this. Distribute. So I've got x squared minus 33x equals, distribute the 10, that's negative 20x minus 30. Looks like a quadratic, doesn't it? Got an x squared, I got an x, and then I got a constant. So let's put everything on the left-hand side, set it equal to 0. We've discussed that many, many times this year, haven't we? Yep, so you should be familiar with that. So what do? We added 20x to both sides, added 20x to this side, right? And we're going to add a 30, and we'll add a 30 to this side. Alright, so that cancels out, that cancels out, so now I have a 0 over here. Let's see what else I have over here on the left. Got x squared, what's this? Yep, minus 13x, okay, plus 30 equals 0. Now yesterday we did a problem. We came out something like this, but the problem had some more difficult numbers in it, didn't it? So we stuck it into the quadratic formula. But this is actually fairly easy. We can factor this, and I think it'll be a lot quicker than using the quadratic formula. Now, can you use the formula? Yeah, absolutely, if you wanted to. But yeah, I'm going to go negative on both of these because they have to multiply to be positive and add up to be negative, and I got 10 and 3, right? So they multiply to be positive 30, add up to be negative 13. Set them both equal to 0. I'll skip that step. We'll just do it in our head. So if you set them equal to 0, what's x? X is 10, and x is 3. And that's... Can you do 15 and 2? No, because they both have to be negative. And negative 15 minus 2 would be negative 17. So I was reading off the right answer key, wasn't I? Because that's what I read off for number 2. But everybody looked at me like I was crazy for saying that. But that's what it is, 10 and 3. Nobody got that on their own? Not one person in here got that on their own? You did get it? Okay, good. Alright. Because that's something you should be able to do, okay? That's nothing out of the realm of possibility for you, okay? That's definitely... Okay, that's something that you should definitely be able to do. So, review it. Go over it. Number 3. Negative 3x over 2 plus 24x minus 1 over 6. We did this exact one yesterday? Alright, well let's not do this one then. Did it yesterday. And that's that one you were telling me, right, that I got a different answer than what they got. Yeah, they got a weird answer. I just didn't change that on my answer sheet. So, alright, let's go to number 4 then. Now, I didn't record that one from yesterday, but you should have that on your notes. Alright. So, let's do number 4 then. Trying to save some time. Squared plus 3, 3y plus 4, and then minus 10 equals 0. Even tells you how to solve this, doesn't it? It says solve the equation by using the method of substitution. Alright, hopefully you remember what that was. Or if you didn't remember it, you looked it up. That's what you're supposed to do. If you didn't do enough. Alright, that's all I'll say about that. So what we're going to do is, this is one of those deals where we say let, what, x equal, what are we going to let x equal? Yeah, this thing right here, because this is kind of like something squared plus 3 something, right? It's the same thing as this. So it's like x squared plus 3x minus 10 equals 0. So let x equal 3y plus 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, every time you see a 3y plus 4, we're going to replace it with an x. That's why they call it substitution. Right? So we're going to put x in for that. So now we can write it a little bit nicer. We can go x squared plus 3x minus 10 equals 0. That was our substitution. That makes things easier. It really does, I promise you. You may look at it and say, oh, that makes it too confusing. It actually makes it way easier to work with. So look at this thing right here. Now this is a nice little problem where we can factor it. Not a difficult factoring problem. If you don't know your factoring, which you should know, but let's say you don't, you can always use the quadratic formula to solve this if you wanted to. But I think it takes a little longer with this problem. Knowing how to factor, I think, is a little bit easier. So put an x and an x here, put a plus and a minus, right? Because they have to multiply to be negative, add up to be positive. So what numbers are you going to get? Pretty easy, right? 5 and 2. Multiply to be negative 10, and they add up to be positive 3. That's what we want. We set them both equal to 0. I'll skip that step. You can write it if you want. X plus 5 equals 0, so x must equal negative 5, and x must equal positive 2. Everybody see what we did? I said x plus 5 equal to 0, and x minus 2 equals 0, then I solve for x. It's not my answer, though, is it? I got to plug it back in, okay? We just solve for x. We want to solve for y, don't we? We want to plug it back in. So what did we say x was equal to? We said x was equal to 3y plus 4, didn't we? So let's go back to the other color, and we'll solve for y. So x is negative 5, but we said that x was 3y plus 4. So instead of saying x equals, we're going to say 3y plus 4 equals negative 5. We're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to say 3y plus 4 equals positive 2. And now we can solve for y, and once we solve for y, that'll be our answer. So let's do that real quick. We subtract 4 from both sides. So 3y equals negative 9. Divide by 3, and y is negative 3. Yep, just like I read off earlier. Subtract 4 from both sides. 3y equals negative 2. Divide by 3, and there's your answer. Y equals negative 2/3. And that is what I read off. So I did have the right answer sheet, didn't I? Okay, I'll keep going. It's all online for you if I went a little fast. So use it. Number 5. This is also substitution. So these, 4? They give you 4 of them. They all look a little different, but we're using substitution for all of them. Plus 2 t minus 1 to the 1/3. And then minus 8, and that equals 0. Alright. This doesn't look quite as familiar as a quadratic, but it is if you look at it. Because look, if this t minus 1 to the 1/3 was an x, this would be what? T minus 1/3 squared, wouldn't it? So it would be x squared plus 2 what? X minus 8 equals 0. So what are we going to do? We're going to let's do this in another color. We're going to let x equal what? T minus 1 to the 1/3. They always rig these. They always make these pretty easy for you. This middle term, not term, but whatever you want to call it, that middle thing, next to the coefficient, that variable, I guess, if you want to call it that, that's always going to be your x. So you let x equal this thing right here. And this should always be x squared because they've rigged this for you. Okay, they've always taken this x and they've squared it. So they do it the same way every single time. So they make it kind of easy for you. So let x equal this. So what are we going to do? We're going to rewrite this. Instead of t minus 1 to the 1/3, we're going to write what? X to the second power, right? Squared. Exactly. So this is going to be x squared. This is going to be plus 2x, right? Because that we made that thing that's circled right there in x. And then we go minus 8 equals 0. Third time today we've done a factoring, isn't it? You got to know your factoring. So you got an x here and an x here. What are you going to use? 4 and 2, right? Plus 4 minus 2, right? They're easy numbers, right? I didn't pick numbers that are real difficult to put in here. Set them both equal to 0, so x equals -4 and x equals positive 2. We're not finished, though. We just found x, and they want you to solve for t. So, instead of saying x equals -4, we're going to say what x is equal to. This thing right here. So instead of x, we're going to replace it with t minus 1 to the 1/3, and then we're going to set that equal to -4. Because remember, x and t minus 1 to the 1/3 is the same thing, isn't it? So I just replace that x with what x is equal to, t minus 1 to the 1/3. Do the same exact thing over here. Instead of x equals 2, I'm going to put t minus 1 to the 1/3 and set that equal to 2. That's a weird 3. Let's try that again. Okay. And now we can solve for t. Now, the solving for t here is a little bit more difficult than what solving for y was in the other problem. But once you get used to this, and if you look back, again, if you look back at how we taught this, you'll have seen one that looks like this. How do we get rid of a 1/3 power? What do we do to get rid of a 1/3 power? We not cube root it, but just cube it. Just cube the thing, okay? So we just cube it. Alright, so I take this whole thing and cube this, which will cancel out that. And then I got to come over here and cube that. That gets rid of that 1/3 power. So now what do I have? I have t minus 1 equals, you got to figure out what this is. -4 times -4 times -4. That would be -64. Okay? And then you add a 1, so t is -63. So that's one of my answers. Let's do the same thing over here. So let's cube this side and cube this side. So that cancels out. I've got t minus 1 equals 2 cubed, which is 8. Add a 1 to both sides, and t is equal to 9. Let me make sure that's our answer. It sure is. -63 and positive 9. Getting used to the substitution now? Alright, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to skip 6 and 7. Let me give you the answers, though, because we've done enough substitution. Let's do another type of problem. Number 6 was -2 was one answer, and 1/3 was the other answer. Alright, so there's two answers, -2, and then the second answer is 1/3. Number 7, it's plus or minus I square root of 3. That's two of your possible answers. I'll say it again, plus or minus I square root of 3. Then your second answer, or your third and fourth answer, I guess you could say, is plus or minus square root of 5. Plus or minus square root of 5. Let's do the substitution the same way that we did these other ones. Now the algebra is a little bit different when you have to solve for it, but the basic substitution idea is the same. Alright, let's move on. Just because I don't want to do the whole period with substitution here. Let's skip to number 8. So we'll just do this one together. It's x squared minus 3 and then minus the square root of x plus 3, and that is equal to 0. Alright, we're running short on time, so let me just do the problem. I'm not going to explain it too much, but we will just show you what to do. We want to get the square roots on different sides so we can square both sides. We don't want to square it the way it is. That would be really, really ugly. So we add a square root of x plus 3 to both sides. So we've got this, and we have this. Alright, so we just added it to both sides. That way, this makes things a lot easier for me now. Now I got a square root here, square root here. We can just square both sides. We're allowed to do that as long as we do it to both sides. What happens to that square and the square root? Cancel each other out, right? Cancel this, the square and the square root cancel each other out. And so I'm left with this, and I'm left with this. Looks like a quadratic again. What's that? About the third or fourth time today we've done that? So what do we want to do? We want to put everything on the left-hand side and set it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract an x from both sides. Right? That'll get rid of this. I'll just scribble it out. Then we subtract a 3 from both sides, and that gives us a minus 6 equals 0. This is another problem that factors pretty easy. They've made the factoring pretty simple. And this is going to be minus 3 plus 2. Is that right? Yep. Set them both equal to 0, so x is 3 and x is negative 2. Now, when you square both sides, weird things happen every once in a while, so you got to make sure you put it back in and check. Okay, most of the time, both of those answers will be okay, but there are some times where one of those answers won't work, or neither one of them will work. So you got to double check. So let's put them in just real quick. Put in the 3. 3 squared is 9. 9 minus 3 is 6, and this would be the square root of 6. Okay, put the 3 in for here. 3 plus 3 is what? 6. So it's going to be minus square root of 6. Is square root of 6 minus 6 0? Absolutely, it works. Put a negative 2 in for this. Negative 2 squared is positive 4. 4 minus 3 is 1. Square root of 1 is 1. Put in a negative 2 for this. Negative 2 plus 3 is 1. Square root of 1 is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. That checks. So we're fine. We can circle both of those answers right there. Does that help a little bit? Okay. So we did up to number 8. We probably won't go over every single one of these problems on Tuesday because that'll be our last day to review. So we're going to take the test on Wednesday. What day is Wednesday? Wednesday is the 22nd. All right, so it's 2, 2, 2, 1, 2. Look at that. All right, so that's when we're going to take the test.